Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today with, honestly, a pretty striking decision out of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, really quite something.
A unanimous one. 9-0s. The justices have ordered the Trump administration to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. He'd been deported to El Salvador.
Unanimous on an issue like this, it definitely makes you sit up and take notice.
Absolutely.
And just for background, Mr. Abrego Garcia, he's a Maryland resident, according to the BBC reporting. And the core issue, as you said, is the Supreme Court found his deportation unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional. That's a strong word from the court. And deported to El Salvador specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So for our deep dive today, we're looking mainly at a YouTube analysis from Glenn Kirshner. He's been digging into the news reports, BBC, Washington Post, and of course the actual Supreme Court ruling itself.
Right. So our goal here is really to unpack this. What were the circumstances around the deportation? What were the arguments? How did the administration respond? And, what does this unanimous decision actually mean going forward? What are the ripple effects?
Okay, so let's start there. The deportation itself to El Salvador. Why is that specific location important here?
Well, from what we're seeing, he was sent to a place called the CCOT Center for the Confinement of Terrorism. It's apparently a prison known for holding gang members.
Wow.
Yeah, and there seems to have been some sort of agreement between the U.S. and El Salvador about handling certain individuals. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
The Trump administration actually conceded the deportation happened because of an administrative error. That's their term for it.
An administrative error. That feels insufficient, especially because there was already a court order, right? A withholding order.
Exactly. A pre-existing order that explicitly said he could not be removed to El Salvador.
So it wasn't just a paperwork mistake. They're basically admitting they violated a direct court order.
They are. They've acknowledged the deportation itself was illegal, which is pretty significant.
Yeah.
But this is where, the analysis from Kirshner on YouTube gets interesting. He really questions that administrative error label.
How so?
He floats the idea, based on the context, that maybe it wasn't just an error. Maybe it was more intentional, perhaps meant to send some kind of message about immigration enforcement.
A deliberate act despite the court order. That's a serious suggestion.
It is. And look, some legal commentators have sort of echoed that, suggesting maybe it was about appearing tough, regardless of the legal constraints already in place.
Okay, but is there actual proof of that, or is it speculation?
That's a fair question. And Kirshner himself is clear this hasn't been proven in court. It's an interpretation, right? Based on the fact that a clear judicial order seemed to have been, ignored.
Right. It definitely raises eyebrows when a direct court order is bypassed like that.
It really does. So you have this situation, illegal deportation, violation of a court order, and Abrego Garcia ends up in this specific prison in El Salvador.
So what was the next step legally? How did this get challenged?
The case went to the district court for the District of Maryland, and that court acted pretty decisively.
Okay.
They issued an order telling the Trump administration they had to, quote, facilitate and effectuate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. And they set a deadline, April 7th.
Facilitate and effectuate. Okay.
Right.
And I assume the administration didn't just say, okay or bad?
No, they took it straight to the Supreme Court. They asked the justices to step in and block the district court's order. The Supreme Court said no, denied the request. So basically, they upheld the core part of the order, the part about facilitating his return.
So a win for Abrego Garcia then. He's definitely coming back.
Mostly, yes. But there's a little bit of Supreme Court nuance here, which is kind of typical. It involves that word effectuate.
Okay. What's the issue with effectuate?
Well, the justices, while agreeing he needs to come back, signaled some concern. They worried that telling the administration to effectuate the return might tread on the executive branch's toes, concerning foreign policy. Conducting foreign affairs is generally the president's job.
I see. So they're worried the how might be problematic, that the court might be dictating foreign policy actions.
Kind of. They basically kicked that specific word back down to the district court, asking them to clarify what exactly effectuate means in this context. They want to make sure the order gets him back without the judiciary overstepping into executive territory.
Okay, so it's about maintaining that separation of powers, even while correcting the illegal deportation.
Precisely. It's a balancing act. But, and this is important, there was also a separate statement from Justice Sotomayor, joined by Kagan and Jackson.
Right. Kirshner pointed this out, too. What did they say?
It was pretty pointed.
Yeah.
Very direct. They flat out condemned the administration's actions.
Condemned.
They used terms like warrantless arrest, illegal removal, and his confinement in a Salvadoran prison without any legal basis. Really strong language.
Wow.
And the most powerful line, arguably, was when they said the administration had offered no basis in law for doing what they did, and then added, nor could it.
Nor could it. That leaves no ambiguity, does it?
Mhm.
Coming from 3 justices, it sounds like they're saying there was simply no possible legal justification.
Exactly. It really hammers home the severity of the situation, the apparent disregard for legal process, and that existing court order.
So let's talk about who argued this for the administration. That was the Solicitor General, John Sauer.
That's right, John Sauer. And just for folks listening, the Solicitor General, or SG, is the government's main lawyer before the Supreme Court. Their arguments carry a lot of weight.
So what was Sauer's argument against bringing Abrego Garcia back? How did he try to justify the administration's position?
His core argument, based on the reporting, was basically about presidential power. He argued the Constitution gives the president, not the courts, the lead on foreign diplomacy and protecting the country from foreign terrorists.
Okay.
And he explicitly said this power includes effectuating their removal.
So he's arguing for very broad executive power here, potentially even overriding a court order in the name of national security or foreign policy.
That seems to be the thrust of it, yeah. But, I mean, the irony is pretty thick, isn't it?
How so?
He's making this argument about presidential authority while defending an administration that just illegally deported someone against a court order, sending him to the very country the court said he couldn't be sent to.
Yeah, that definitely creates a contradiction. Arguing for respecting authority while seemingly defending an action that ignored it.
It does make the argument ring a bit hollow in this specific case. And interestingly, this whole situation seems to be part of a wider unease within the Solicitor General's office itself.
Oh, what's happening there?
The Washington Post reported recently that a, quote, significant number of lawyers are planning to leave the SG's office.
Really? That many? Why?
Well, the reporting points to a few things, but a big one seems to be discomfort with directives from the top of the Justice Department. Specifically, Attorney General Pam Bondi's reported push for zealous advocacy of President Trump's agenda.
Zealous advocacy. So potentially putting political goals ahead of traditional legal principles. Is that the concern?
That seems to be the interpretation, yeah. That career attorneys felt pressured, maybe uncomfortable with the lines they were being asked to cross.
That sounds like a recipe for internal conflict. What does that kind of turnover mean for the office? Does it weaken their ability to argue cases effectively?
It definitely could. And it raises questions about morale and maybe a broader disagreement within the legal community about the administration's approach. It certainly doesn't help continuity or expertise.
And didn't the YouTube source mention something about Sauer's background before he became Solicitor General?
Yes, that's right. Kirshner pointed out that Sauer had previously worked as one of Donald Trump's criminal defense attorneys.
And there was that specific argument he made about presidential power.
Yeah, Kirshner recalled Sauer arguing, and Kirshner says he was there in the courtroom, the D.C. Circuit Court, that a president could theoretically order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
Assassinate a rival?
And not face criminal charges unless first impeached and convicted by Congress.
That is an extraordinarily broad view of presidential immunity and power.
It is. And having the person who made that argument then become the top lawyer arguing for the government before the Supreme Court. Well, it certainly makes you think about the legal philosophy guiding the DOJ at that time.
It really does. You can sort of see why some career lawyers might feel uneasy, I guess.
Yet, given that context, the reports of departures perhaps aren't entirely surprising. When you see that kind of potential clash between established norms and political demands in government legal teams, it often leads to friction. It can really impact how well they function.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've got a 9-deal Supreme Court decision saying the Trump administration acted illegally deporting Abrego Garcia and must bring him back.
Yep, unanimous.
The administration's administrative error explanation is being seriously questioned.
Skepticism there.
The exact process of his return still has a slight wrinkle the lower court needs to iron out because of the effectuate wording and separation of powers concerns.
Right, that nuance from the Supreme Court.
And all this is playing out while the Solicitor General's office, the very office arguing these cases, is reportedly facing significant internal departures potentially linked to political pressure.
That's a good wrap-up. The absolute core is that illegal deportation, done despite a court order. It really throws a spotlight on the executive branch acting, apparently, outside its legal bounds, and the judicial branch stepping in, unanimously, to push back.
So for our listeners, maybe the final thought to chew on is this. What does it tell us when you have the Supreme Court completely united, ruling against the executive branch on something like immigration, especially when paired with reports of significant turnover in a key legal office like the Solicitor General's? What does this episode reveal about the health of checks and balances and that constant tension between executive power and the rule of law in the U.S. system? Something to consider.